Okay, movie presentation project. I did A Beautiful Mind. The subject of the film is John Nash, who is a schizophrenic. John Nash is a graduate student at Princeton University in New Jersey, where he is trying to come up with some big idea all about he wants to matter to the world, not just be someone who reads the books over and over again like his classmates. And he comes up with this idea called governing dynamics that is used in economics later in the film. And this idea lands him working for MIT at Wheeler Laboratories, and while there, he's doing government work. And during his work, he is cracking codes for the United States against the Russians. And later in the movie, you discover that this has all been happening in his head, because John is schizophrenic. His entire work for the government was completely concocted in his brain, along with his college roommate never actually existed. And the entire rest of the film has to do with him dealing with the effects of schizophrenia and what it does to his life and to his family, and him learning to manage it, going through a relapse and having to take his medication and go through therapy and things like this. And he retires back to a quiet life at Princeton, just merely focusing on his work because he is a brilliant mathematician. And from there, he only seeks to just do his work. And while there, he is informed that his work while on his graduate studies at Princeton is being considered for the Nobel Prize. And the last scenes of the film are him winning it and him giving his speech to the entire crowd, and him singling out his wife, that without her, he would have not been able to make it through the trials of his life. In the book, if you look up schizophrenia, you find that according to the DSM-5, it is known as the schizophrenia spectrum, which is a change from the DSM-4, where it was strictly known as schizophrenia. There are no subtypes because the disease is so specific. And the 5 causes for showing that one is schizophrenic, in order to be diagnosed, psychologists and psychiatrists say that you need to only be showing 2 of them, such as delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, grossly or disorganized catatonic behavior, or negative symptoms, such as lashing out to others, being removed from society, things like that. John shows the majority of these in the movie, except he doesn't show many signs of disorganized speech. He's never babbling his words, or he always is able to speak clearly, but he definitely has delusions and hallucinations and negative symptoms, as you can see in the picture here. The treatment of schizophrenia is pretty difficult because you're strictly asking the patient to change what he has perceived as reality for a long time. But what they did in the movie works well for John and has worked well historically for other patients, which is you apply medication biologically, such as Thorazine, and then also you have electroshock therapy, which stimulates the brain and allows them to return to some form of normalcy. From the very opening scene, you can tell that there is something off about John. In the opening scene, you can see that he is sitting removed from the entire rest of his classmates while at grad school at Princeton. And throughout the entire rest of the film, a viewer wouldn't know this for the first time seeing it, but his roommate is even a delusion of his mind. Some people that he works with are delusions of his brain. Even one of his delusions suddenly concocts a family member, they occur throughout the movie because for a long time he thinks that these are actually characters in his head, so the movie does a great job of presenting them as such. And then he often does see these things and infer them as his reality, and even towards the very end of the film, he still sees them. He just learns that they are not, in fact, real. movie does a fantastic job of depicting schizophrenia, such as the way that it needs to be treated and the side effects of such, and just the harsh reality that someone has to go through knowing that their, in fact, reality is not what they've perceived it to be for their entire life. The psychiatrist in the movie gives a pretty good line that states that what if one day you woke up and if everything you had perceived as your reality wasn't gone, wasn't forgotten, but had actually just never been? And that's a perfect line, if you will, for schizophrenia as to what it does. It shows that treatment is possible and that it can be managed and handled over time, not that as soon as you're diagnosed that everything is lost. The film is very serious. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. The way it's shot is fantastic, but it is very serious in the sense that there are some lighthearted moments. There is some slight humor thrown in, but it does an excellent job of seeing the toll that this disease takes. Such as there's a scene where John almost drowns his own baby purely because he thinks that one of his delusions is in the room watching his child in the tub, and it's very powerful. It hits home and it does an excellent job of depicting what schizophrenia does. John is a brilliant mathematician, and so whenever he's diagnosed with schizophrenia, he immediately tries to find a way so that he can solve what's going on in his head. He wants to fix what's going on in his brain. And at the end of the movie, whenever he's accepting his Nobel Prize, he has this moment where he looks at his wife and says that without you, you are all that I am. You are all my reasons. And so without you, I would not have been able to be. And that's just an idea that even though he couldn't solve what was going on in his head, there were other means to fix what was going on in his life through love, essentially, is what got him through this whole ordeal. There were three scenes that really hit home about schizophrenia. There's his breakdown at Harvard, where he's giving a guest lecture where he thinks he's being pursued by the Russians because they finally found him doing all his code breaking. And he wakes up, and the next scene is him at a rehab facility. And then there's a scene where at the facility he digs into his arm to find an implant that was showing the secret codes he had to input in order to give the government, the United States government, their secrets they were looking for, the broken codes in order to find the bomb that the Russians had placed in the United States. And then the most powerful one is one I've already hit on, where he almost drowns his own child purely because he thinks one of his delusions is in the room with him. The film is incredibly entertaining to watch because out of nowhere in the middle of the movie they throw this huge curveball that everything that's been happening thus far actually wasn't real. It was just purely going on inside John's head. And so then for the second half of the movie almost, it's the viewer finds themselves distinguishing between, okay, what's actually happening, what's real, what's in John's head, how's this all going to be solved? And then it just, you are glued to the screen from the second you put it in because of the way that it captures you with so many different plot lines going on at once. The fact that this film is a true story and that all of this actually happened is reason enough for me to recommend this to anyone. But the fact that it is also a fantastic movie that won the Academy Award for Best Picture, in 2002, is merely just icing on the cake because it is a fantastic movie with great casts. Russell Crowe gives one of the best performances he's ever given, and the whole movie really is it captures your attention very, very well. Other films I would recommend. I just watched The Accountant recently. It depicts a man with autism who it's a very hardcore action movie, but the man is autistic and he does have to deal with that throughout the majority of the movie. And then the last one, certainly not an educational film, definitely not one that you should watch with other people in the room, but it does have some psychological instances in it because throughout the majority of the movie, Jordan Belfort is struggling with substance abuse and the challenges from that. Excuse me. And that's the end of it. Thank you for watching.